Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. All right. Good evening. Welcome to Screening Quincy Jones. This is the kickoff event for Beyond Category Quincy Jones, our year-long celebration at the Thornton School of Music. Yeah, come on. My name is Jason King. I am Dean of the Thornton School and producer of this. Yeah, I'll take the applause. Come on. Just keep it going, yes. Producer of this series. One of the very first things that I did after receiving the call confirming my new role as Dean, I've been in the job now 14 months, before the ink on my contract was even dry, I reached out to Quincy Jones' office. And the goal for me was to explore potential collaborations here at USC. So for those who are less familiar, and I can't imagine anybody in this room is less familiar, but I'm gonna say it anyway, Quincy Jones is one of the greatest masters of 20th and 21st century music. His unprecedented and prodigious career spans roles as a musician, producer, songwriter, composer, working in genres as diverse as classical, jazz, pop, R&B, and beyond. From his work in classical with figures like Nadia Boulanger, Olivier Messiaen, to the jazz he made with artists from Basie to Sarah Vaughan, to Dinah Washington, to Frank Sinatra, to Peggy Lee, to name just a few, to his top flight work in pop music, including everything from Leslie Gore's It's My Party, to film scores like In Cold Blood, The Pawnbroker, TV compositions like Roots, films like The Wiz, The Color Purple. Of course, he was the first African American to be nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song. To his own award-winning albums, including so many, Body Heat, The Dude, Back on the Block. His singular producing of that triumvirate of Michael Jackson's landmark albums, Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad, and the top-selling We Are the World, to his founding of Vibe magazine in the 1990s, and we are literally just scratching the surface. Quincy Jones' influence is monumental, and his contributions don't just stop at music, they extend into philanthropy and investment. He is a true and steadfast supporter of the arts, with more than 79 Grammy nominations, 28 wins, 2013 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. The accolades continue to accumulate. This year, he will receive a special Academy Award to add to his existing Academy Humanitarian Award and his 7 Oscar nominations. My goal is to make the Thornton School of Music the unrivaled leader in music education anywhere in the world. And I believe it's our privilege and our responsibility to study Quincy Jones, this towering figure in American music and a quintessential icon of Los Angeles' musical heritage as well. Many of you have read interviews or seen interviews with Quincy Jones. In one particular interview, the reporter asked, do you lament the fact that in music there are so many silos between genres like jazz, rock, and pop? And Quincy Jones responds in a way that he often does if you've read his responses in interviews. He says, from day one, we knew how to play every kind of music. Sousa, Debussy, at bar mitzvahs, rhythm and blues, everything. God gave us 12 notes, and Bach, Brahms, Beethoven, Bo Diddley, Basie, Bird all use the same 12 notes. It's good he can use those alliterations too, the B's. Yeah, that's just great. He goes on to say, the best gift I ever had in my life was one of the first television productions I did. Duke Ellington, We Love You Madly. Duke gave me a picture of him and he signed it. May you be the one to decategorize American music. Most top-tier music schools are traditionally divided by genre. Classical, what used to be called serious music, over here. Jazz department over here. If they have a pop department, over here. One of my goals as dean is to do away with the silos and divisions that characterize schools like the Thornton School. Those divisions between genres and idioms and styles like classical and jazz and pop and beyond. And as dean, I'm aiming to break down those silos and to eliminate those divisions. Rather than separating classical and jazz and pop and other genres, I envision a school where those boundaries dissolve, allowing our students to explore a larger, greater creative sandbox. I want them to have the freedom to pursue their own musical journeys without the constraints of genres, external pressures like label pressures, industry pressures, and other sorts of externally imposed pressures. I want them to foster their own artistic expression and define professional success on their own terms. I want to cultivate students who share Quincy Jones' broad range of musical and cultural competencies. They can be fluent in a variety of styles. Why just limit yourself to one? Jazz, pop, classical, rock, gospel, flamenco, hip hop, electronic music, Afrobeats, probably name 15 more right now. In many ways, Quincy Jones is the embodiment of this vision, much like how he picked up the baton from Duke Ellington, who I would argue is the greatest original American composer in the history of music. Quincy Jones today stands as the living symbol of what we aim to instill in our students: the pursuit of excellence, artistic freedom, and a pluralistic approach to music. No figure, in my mind, is more deserving of celebration than Quincy Jones. He has not only decategorized American music, but has done so with skyscraping virtuosity and excellence across all genres. While there are many schools with classes devoted to Beethoven and the Beatles and other deserving paragons of excellence, to my knowledge, no university music program has truly given Quincy Jones the recognition he truly deserves, and that is the reason for this series. We hope to change that. We're offering an unprecedented, long-form, deep dive into the life and work of one of the greatest figures in music history at a major American institution, Thornton School of Music and USC. And while we may be the first to undertake such a durational tribute to a figure like Quincy Jones, I really do hope that we will not be the last. And since I feel like I'm speaking to a room of friends, I don't know if I am, but I feel the energy, feel the warmth. Let me put this idea out into the universe in the spirit of what everybody today on social media seems to be calling manifesting. But I believe that Los Angeles should one day have a university performing arts center and a venue with Quincy Jones' name on it. And it's my hope. It's my hope that the Thornton School of Music can be a driver for that dream to become a reality. Tonight is only the first event in a series celebrating Quincy Jones. About a month from now, on October 23rd, see what's up there, we are hosting a public masterclass with none other than the legendary vocalist Patty Austin. Don't make me start singing How Do You Keep the Music Playing, Bet You Wouldn't Hurt Me, Baby Come to Me, you know, list goes on and on. It will be moderated by Thornton's Chair of Pop Performance, Lyndia Johnson, and Associate Professor of Jazz Studies, Luciana Souza. So I hope to see you there. What a rare opportunity to come to something like that. And the same day, that night, we have an all-star panel for In Tune with Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones is a highly collaborative, interdependent music maker who worked with such a constellation of amazing talents throughout his career. And we're focused just on a relatively small cadre of some of the most important collaborators in his work in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and beyond. That will include Patty Austin, Saida Garrett, the legendary performer and co-writer of Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror, among many other songs, Paul Jackson Jr., USC Thornton faculty, masterful guitar player whose riffs have shaped many of Quincy Jones' hits, David Paik, the brilliant keyboardist and songwriter known for his work with Toto, Gregg Field, the versatile keyboardist and arranger. Yeah, let's come on with the applause, who played a pivotal role in so many Quincy Jones projects, and many more, including the great Mervyn Warren, who is with us tonight here in the audience, producer and arranger, key Quincy Jones collaborator, phenomenal vocal arranger. Speaking of Mervyn, November 21st, our next event in the series. Every month you can celebrate Quincy Jones here. The Making of Handel's Messiah, a soulful celebration. So in 1992, Mervyn, five-time Grammy Award-winning composer, arranger, and original member of Take Six, spearheaded a soulful rendition of Handel's Messiah. How many people heard that album, remember that album? Yes, well, if you haven't, this is your opportunity to come. We're gonna do a close listening, which means basically everybody in the same room listening to this album at the same time. Remember when we used to do that, instead of listening privately? Going through the entire album, and then we'll have a panel featuring Mervyn along with some special guests, which I think I can announce tonight for the first time. Claude McKnight from Take Six, Tevin Campbell will be with us as well. That panel will be co-moderated by Dr. Tram Sparks, the chair of our choral and sacred music program. March 14th, moving into March, so you have some time, holidays, December, January, February. March 14th, Quincy's birthday, the USC Thornton Symphony will honor Quincy Jones with a special evening dedicated to his film and TV compositions. If you have not seen the symphony before, you must. It's absolutely incredible. The program will feature selections from scores like Roots and Color Purple, and will be under the direction of legendary conducting chair Larry Livingston. And then the next day, March 15th, we close this year's celebration with an event on Vibe magazine, which is celebrating and bringing together some of the original music writers, critics, and editors from the early days of Vibe. Of course, a publication that Quincy Jones, as I mentioned before, founded. And they'll discuss their experiences at the magazine and its legacy, and that will be in conjunction with the 2025 Pop Conference that we host here at USC. So I say all that because I hope to see you back, and please tell a friend. I'm going to briefly pass the mic to two of my colleagues. Jason Goldman first, who is the chair of the jazz department here at the Thornton School, himself a multi-platinum selling record producer, songwriter, composer, arranger. I wanted to say a few words about our jazz program and the connection to Quincy and Duke Ellington. Welcome up, Jason Goldman.
Whew. Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. While most know Quincy Jones as a legendary pop music producer and icon, who still holds the crown, by the way, for producing the biggest pop album of all time, and Michael Jackson's Thriller back in 1982, at his core, Quincy is a jazz musician. He began his career like most jazz musicians, playing, in his case, the trumpet, composing, arranging, playing gigs. Quincy has worked with some of the most incredible musicians of all time, as we heard. And while there are far too many names, people to name here, he has literally helped develop two of the greatest talents in the history of music, and that being Michael Jackson and Frank Sinatra. Duke Ellington is one of the most prolific jazz musicians, composers, and arrangers in the history of jazz music. Duke pushed the limits of what the big band can do, from traditional hard-swinging music to music that infused jazz with Latin and African genres of music, to scoring films exclusively featuring jazz music. Duke was always pushing for new sounds. Both of these jazz musicians are vital not only to jazz, but to music as a whole. They've pushed the boundaries, crossed genres, and used their jazz sensibilities and creativity to influence music in ways most of us can only dream of. I have the good fortune of leading the USC Thornton Jazz Studies program, and I can tell you, as a professor who's been here teaching in our department for over 22 years, both Ellington and Quincy are what our students dream of becoming. Innovators in music, pushing the boundaries, creating the highest art, all with the jazz tradition and foundation as their rock and guiding light. The USC Thornton Jazz Studies Department has been around since the mid-'70s and strives to teach all of the essential tools of jazz music: improvisation, composing, arranging, band leading, and more. All of this with a nod to the future. Our students graduate from the jazz department not only influencing the broader jazz world, but are now influencing all genres of music, like Duke and Quincy have done. Our alumni are some of the top jazz musicians in the world, boasting players such as pianist and Blue Note recording artist Gerald Clayton, who is now serving as our first ever artist in residence. Some of our other alumni that are making their mark today are piano players like Taylor Eckstine, Tigran Hamasyan, bassist Harish Raghavan, and saxophonist Nicole McCabe. While we also have jazz majors that have taken their jazz education here at Thornton and used it to influence other genres. Musicians such as drummer Lewis Cole, who took his jazz education and created the group Knower, which is a high-intensity electronic jazz funk group. That's a way to say it anyways. The group Moonchild, all three of those members, Amber Navran, Max Brick, and Andres Matson, all jazz majors, are now one of the most followed R&B soul groups. And finally, one of the greatest freestyle rappers on the planet, and arguably ever, Harry Mack, AKA Harry Mackenzie, was a straight-ahead bebop jazz drummer here in our jazz studies department. This is a true testament to what we are doing here at Thornton and in the world of music at large. This year, we have some unbelievable guests performing on our concert stage. Our artist in residence, Gerald, will present a solo piano concert on October 7th. The great John Clayton will be conducting a concert of his music with our very own Thornton Jazz Orchestra on November 6th. And in March, we have the iconic large ensemble composer from New York, Maria Schneider, leading our jazz orchestra in a concert of her music. And we hope to see you all at one of those shows real soon. In conclusion, thank you to Quincy and, of course, Duke for the music and the magic you have imparted to the world. You are and have been a true inspiration to us all. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Jason. So just a reminder, all of those events are available to you and free, so please come and encourage others to come as well. I'd now like to invite Dr. Ron McCurdy, Professor of Jazz Studies and our Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Thornton School to come and say a couple of words.
Thank you, Jason. Jason asked us to speak for about 90 seconds. Clearly, he doesn't understand that most professors have never met a microphone they didn't like. So I will do my best to keep it under 90 seconds, but no promises. Good evening. My name is Ron McCurdy, and I have the honor of serving as Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Our mission is very simple. We want to help create an inclusive environment where our students, faculty, staff can realize their dreams and goals. As we embark upon this year-long celebration of Quincy Jones's life and legacy, we start by recognizing someone who served as a tremendous role model for Quincy Jones, the incomparable Edward Kennedy Ellington. Quincy Jones, like Ellington, knows no musical boundaries. As Duke Ellington would often state, there are only two kinds of music: good music and bad music. The depth and breadth of both Duke Ellington and Quincy Jones's musical accomplishments have proven to be more than worthy of academic and artistic study. In the words of the late actor Sammy Davis Jr., and I quote, "Duke Ellington was the epitome of elegance. He had the ability to be in the middle of it and above it at the same time. He taught us the true meaning of style, the true meaning of grace, the true meaning of floating. African Americans were often described as clumsy, stupid, shuffling. But when Duke Ellington walked on the stage, all those myths were dissipated," unquote. Ellington's genius lay in his ability to blend diverse musical elements incorporating blues, gospel, classical, and even world music influences into his compositions. He wrote over 2,000 pieces, ranging from big band suites to short, evocative mood pieces. His use of the orchestra was revolutionary, treating each musician as a unique voice rather than a uniformed section. This created lush, textured arrangements that became his signature sound. More than just a jazz musician, Duke Ellington elevated the genre into a serious art form, blending improvisation with orchestration to create music of unparalleled sophistication and emotional depth. His legacy continues to shape music today, standing as a testament to the power of innovation and artistry in American culture. I should close by saying on October 28th, in the spirit of Dean King's departmentalization, we are mounting our own celebration. We're calling it Rockin' in Rhythm, Reimagining the Legacy of Duke Ellington. This will feature our students, arrangers, all of our composition majors from the pop, from the jazz, and from the contemporary division have taken Duke Ellington's compositions, and rather than recreate or replicate what has already been done, we're trying to present Duke Ellington through the lens of 2024. So please join us on that particular date. It promises to be a very special evening. Thank you all so much for joining us, and enjoy the show.
Thank you, Dr. McCurdy. Okay, I know you want to get to the screening, so I'll just say a few more words, and then we will do that. I need to do some thank yous. You always got to do thank yous, because tonight's event and this entire series really did take a village. So I want to thank USC's Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative here on campus that sponsored and made this entire night and the entire series possible. Thank you to Daria Yudakovsky. Amazing work, and her terrific team, including David Delgado, Martin Wong, just to name a few. Without your support, there's no way we would even be here tonight or doing this series, so we're very, very grateful. Please also look into their entire series at Visions and Voices this year. It's absolutely incredible. We'll have another music event at Thornton School of Music next week with the incredible Laura Ortman and Raven Chacon. You can just Google USC Visions and Voices and find that information out. Thank you to our co-sponsor, the Recording Academy Black Music Collective. Thank you to Associate Vice Provost for the Arts and Academic Affairs, Robin Romans, for all his early support of this project, and Josh Kuhn, our new Vice Provost for the Arts at USC. Very special thanks to Dean Elizabeth Daly of the School of Cinematic Arts. You're in a Cinematic Arts building right now. This is how we're able to be here, and thanks to her team at SCA and the staff here at Norris who made this possible. Thanks to the Thornton School of Music, faculty and staff, including but not limited to Jeff DeCan, Heather Pioroda, the entire production team, Michael Dozier, Gretchen Meyer, Sean David Christensen, Deanna Gasparian, and many, many more. Thank you, Gregg Field, chair of the Thornton Board of Counselors, some of whom are here tonight. Richard and Randy Jones, thank you for being here. Jane Solomon, thank you for your support of the school. I want to also just give a couple of shout outs. Holly Foster Wells is here, granddaughter of the great Peggy Lee. Come on, give it up for Peggy Lee. And for Holly Foster Wells, manages the Peggy Lee estate. Peggy Lee, of course, appears in the film tonight. Thank you so much. You've been so supportive and just helpful in terms of making this happen. I also want to thank QD3, the son of Quincy Jones, who's not here tonight, unfortunately, but has been very instrumental in making all of this happen. But Martina Jones is here tonight. I'm going to put her on the spot. The daughter of Quincy Jones is here right in the front row, and we're so happy to have you. Thank you to Mr. Jones and the family. Okay. All right. Here we go. So, Duke Ellington, We Love You Madly, was recorded at the 2,100-seat Schubert Theater in Los Angeles on January 10th and 11th of 1973. It aired a month later, on February 11th. It was Quincy Jones' first television credit as a producer, along with Bud Yorkin and Norman Lear's Tandem Productions, directed by Stan Harris. I mean, it's incredible. The arrangements were done by a who's who of great arrangers of the 70s, Martin Hamlish, Luther Henderson, Thad Jones, and more. Phil Ramone did the audio. The orchestra contained great collaborators of Quincy Jones and Duke Ellington, including Cootie Williams, Kenny Burrell, Dave Grusin, and more. And the talent is incredible. Count Basie, Ray Charles, Chicago. I don't know if I should have put Chicago at the beginning of that sentence, but Chicago, I'll say it again. James Cleveland, Sammy Davis Jr., Billy Eckstine, Roberta Flack, Aretha Franklin, Paula Kelly, Peggy Lee, Sarah Vaughan, Joe Williams, the Cornerstone Baptist Church Choir. In 1973, when it aired, if you think back 30 years before, that's when Duke Ellington and his orchestra played for a black audience at Carnegie Hall for the first time, a series of annual concerts. So Duke Ellington at that time was an incredibly preeminent composer and songwriter. Quincy Jones was just about to continue to do all the amazing work that he would do in the 70s and beyond. His goal in doing this as a musical director was to tell the story of Duke Ellington through music and to acknowledge the full sociological evolution that Duke Ellington has witnessed and to honor the best of what can be in a human being. That's a quote from him directly. Unfortunately, after this, Duke Ellington passed away only just a few months, so this concert TV special is an important moment in history. I want to let you know we spent months trying to track down a screening copy of this. Every conceivable corner. And I regret to say that the only copy available is a very degraded copy, unfortunately. So this is not HD 4K. Just to let you know, there's going to be blips and degrading of the video and so on. But it's all we have, and it points to the reality of documentation and archiving and how easily cultural treasures can be lost. But I think there's value in being in the same room together and having a collective experience. So please go with me on that. All right, without further ado, Duke Ellington, We Love You Madly, and please stay for the post-screening conversation with Ed Eckstine, the legendary entertainment executive, Gregg Field, multiple Grammy-winning producer and musician, and Patrice Rushen, the icon, one of the greatest musicians and composers in history, and also USC Thornton faculty member. All right, here Here we go. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Enjoy it? Quite amazing. I'd like to ask my panelists to come up and join me here. We're just going to go for about 20 minutes or so, and there'll be lots of time for you to also ask questions as well. So let me bring up first the incredible Ed Eckstine. Ed. Oh, okay. He'll be back shortly. So let's start with, is Gregg Field here? Gregg Field is here. Gregg Field is a multiple Grammy-winning music producer, musician, educator, author. Beginning at the age of 19, he toured and played for Ray Charles, Harry James, Mel Torme, Count Basie, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra. I mean, the list is just crazy. Los Angeles session musician. He's recorded with Barbra Streisand, Michael Bublé, Placido Domingo, John Legend, Seal, Barry Manilow. I mean, we'll be here all night. And that's not even talking about the production. You can keep it. Music producer and director extraordinaire. I won't spend all the time here tonight with the bio, but also chair of our board of counselors at the Thornton School of Music, Mr. Gregg Field. Patrice Rushen, come on up. I said the word icon before. I don't like to spread that word around, but Patrice Rushen is an icon extraordinaire. Award-winning musician, composer, also one of the most sought-after artists in the music industry, classically trained pianist who originally found success in the 70s and 80s with her signature fusion of jazz, pop, and R&B. During this era, she composed and recorded many, many hit songs, including Forget-Me-Nots. We'll not be singing that right now. I won't be. Which has been, of course, frequently covered and sampled by many, many other artists. She's been the first female musical director for many of the entertainment industry's top award shows, including the Grammy Awards, Emmy Awards, People's Choice Awards, NAACP Image Awards, and, of course, considered one of the world's top jazz pianists who's performed with and produced for such esteemed artists as Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, Prince, Nancy Wilson, Sheena Easton, Carlos Santana, Freddie Hubbard, and many, many more. Professor, former chair of the popular music program at USC Thornton School of Music. We are so honored to have her, Patrice Rushen. And then Ed Eckstine, who will be here in one moment, legendary entertainment executive, joined Quincy Jones' budding production operation. There he is, he's walking over. In 1974, spent 11 years as a key member of Quincy Jones' entertainment empire, served as executive vice president, general manager, all-around right-hand man, worked on so many projects, including Brothers Johnson, Michael Jackson, George Benson, Rufus and Chaka Khan, Patty Austin, James Ingram, The Roots soundtrack, Wiz, so many more. Music business stints at major positions at Arista Records, Wing Records, at Polygram, worked with artists like Vanessa Williams, Tony, Brian McKnight, president of Mercury Records, and last but not least, son of legendary vocalist, band leader, and matinee idol, Billy Eckstine. This is our panel. Have a seat, everyone. So I want to just start and ask you to talk about your relationship to the special that we just saw, whatever it may be, and to talk also about your relationship to Quincy Jones or to Duke Ellington. Can I start with you, Patrice?
Okay. Duke Ellington, we'll start there, was somebody that was, as you heard in your talks with Dr. McCurdy and yourself and Jason Goldman, represented something for our community beyond the music. There was the elegance in the class that is associated with his presence and with his being is part of what was indicative of his music. When I would see my parents or grandparents dance to his music, it was with a reverence and a pride that allowed for them to be able to enjoy the music at a different level. I didn't understand that then. I really get it now. But that was what Ellington represented. And of course, from the standpoint of the musician, and the musician that I wanted to be, his repertoire, compositions, arrangements, and also the sound of the band was a big deal. As I began to understand a little bit more about what leadership looks like and how to empower people to give their best. And I came in contact with some of his contemporaries. I was able to find out that he would write their names on the music when he would give it to them. And that might sound like a little thing, but it tells you how important it is when you're working with people in a collaborative moment, that you respect what they're going to bring to something when you lay it in front of them correctly, and then they are able to bring themselves to it. And he had that with his band. When we talk about Quincy Jones, for me, we're talking about somebody that I've known since I was about 13. And I used to play a lot in high school in a jazz band. And we did a lot of the Battle of the Band kind of competitions, and Quincy was very regularly an adjudicator. Now, why is it important? Because you don't get all the time that there is an education component that involves him, and yet everything he has ever done, you can see by the breadth of music and by the interest. He never stopped learning and never stopped encouraging people who he saw were serious. At one of these contests, I guess he had seen me enough times, and I did an arrangement. I did an arrangement of Herbie Hancock's Watermelon Man for the high school jazz band, and he said, he wrote on his thing, I need to speak with Patrice. So we had a conversation which changed my life. No, it's brief, so I'll do that and then pass it on. But he said, what do you want to do? And I said, oh, sir, I want to write. I wanted to write for film and television. And he looked at me and he says, oh, you're going to have to be really good. And the look on his face was kind of deep, and I'm 15 now, so I said, what are you talking about? Of course I would want to be good, to myself, of course. And he says, it's going to be harder for you. And I'm 15 and I don't understand. So I'm like, okay. And he says, but you listen to what I'm going to tell you. I need you to hear me. It's okay. He says, diversify. Be as competent in your area as you could possibly be, and know something about every area that touches you the most. Know something about each thing that touches you the most so that you can do your thing the best. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And I left there and I get, what is he talking about? But from that day forward, every time his name came up in my orbit or I was in his, it wasn't a direct thing, but he would always be telling people about me. And when I got one of the first big gigs I got with Benny Golson, Benny had me come to his house and play, and I played, and then I said, how did you find me? He said, Quincy Jones told me to call you. And he said, I started not to because you're so young. And I said, well, what did he tell you to convince you? And he said, you're supposed to teach her. And I know that idea and that ideal has followed his career and has definitely impacted mine. He would allow us, those of us who lived in LA, we would sneak into the soundstage and watch all the shows that he was ever music directing. Then I knew I wanted to be a music director. It was from seeing that and from knowing and understanding a little bit more about what he said when he was talking about how good I would have to be. And that service of understanding what it would take to be about being the best and seeing models of that, I think that's the parallel for me between Ellington and Quincy.
Amazing. Thank you. Gregg Field, can I ask you the same question? Your relationship to the special, to Ellington, to Quincy?
Yeah. Before I do, Patrice and I are the same age, and we went to high school.
No kidding.
Yeah. Well, I look older, but back in 1973 or 74, when we were seniors in high school, I was going to school up in San Francisco, actually next to Oakland, a little town called San Leandro, and she was in a school that had a killer jazz band, and so did we. And we went to the Monterey Jazz Festival, and both of our big bands competed against each other. And that started a 44-year crush on Patrice Rushen for me. Because I'm telling you, she was hot. I never told her that, but that's the truth. I actually go back quite a ways with that special we saw tonight, and I haven't seen it since you guys saw it tonight. 44 years ago, I joined Count Basie's band. I was his drummer. And I worked with most of those people up there a lot, including Ed's dad, Billy Eckstine, who I fell in love with when he was opening for Sammy Davis back in the early 70s. And there was something about the way that Billy Eckstine sang that it's like the entire world stopped. But it's that way with all those singers, isn't it? It's with Aretha. As soon as Aretha comes on, nothing else means anything to any of us, does it? Right? We're all there. And it's that way with Basie. Well, of course it's that way with Quincy. By the way, did anybody notice the picture of Henry Mancini in the audience tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I married Henry's daughter, and she's sitting right there, Monica Mancini. Had to get that in, Jason. In 1972, I met the drummer that was playing on the show, Louis Bellson, who was a very famous drummer. He actually joined Duke Ellington's band in 1951. And about 8 months later, he actually married Pearl Bailey, an amazing guy. And I met him in 72, and he became my drum teacher and my mentor, and we were deeply close friends for a lot of years. And he invited me to A&M Studios for the rehearsals for that show. And let me tell you, it was Quincy and the director, Bud Yorkin. And I don't know how many of you out there have ever been to a rehearsal of new music with multiple singers. It ain't fun. And I mean, they were stepping all over each other. It was a bit of a mess. But the amazing, amazing director, Bud Yorkin. If you don't know Bud, he was, yes, please, if you have a hand for Bud, absolutely. And Norman, and of course, Bud and Norman Lear started Tanner Productions, and they did The Jeffersons, and they did a ton of television shows. But I heard that Nicole Yorkin may be here tonight. Nicole, are you here? She was going to try to make it down. Anyway, I got to know Bud very well, and Bud told me a lot about this show and what a challenge it was, not the least of which, they shot it at a theater that's no longer there. It was over in Century City with the Schubert, right? Yeah. Century City, right. And apparently Ellington got very sick around 10 o'clock at night and had to go to the hospital. And he came back at 2 in the morning. Most of the audience was gone. And some of those things that you saw at the very end with Duke talking, that was shot in the middle of the night. But, you know, to have been a fly on the wall in 73 when that was shot, I was a senior in high school. And, you know, Louis invited me down and to be amongst these people that I woke up in the morning and went to sleep at night thinking about. And I had no idea that one day I would work for them. It was an amazing experience. So thank you, Jason, for showing this tonight. This was incredible, right? I mean, yeah.
Thank you, Gregg. Ed?
If I can add some context to it, mine would be this. I'm Edward Eckstine because my dad's hero was Edward Kennedy Ellington. My middle name, Edward Smith Eckstine is my name. My grandmother's maiden name was Smith. So my dad had an uncle named Edward Smith. So my grandmother thought that I was named after her brother, when the truth of the matter was my dad told me much later I was named Edward after Duke. Because Duke, outside of his family, Duke was on my dad's Mount Rushmore. Duke, Louis Armstrong, Ethel Waters, and Paul Robeson. Those were his heroes. And Ellington was everything to my dad, quite frankly. Duke was always the essence of sartorial splendor. He had a mannered way about him that, a regal way about him that my dad tried to emulate in his own way, and there was a deep love between the two of them. A funny story, because it made me think of it watching this. When Dad sang Sophisticated Lady on the performance, there's a tag at the end of the song where he says, sophisticated, I can't sing. Sophisticated lady, here's a toast to you, and raises a glass. And then one time, apparently in the 1950s, Ellington had come to one of Dad's shows somewhere. And he always called my dad William, and Dad always called him Edward. And so he comes backstage, he says, William? He said, yes, Edward. He said, I couldn't help but notice during your performance this evening, wonderful performance this evening, that you happened to perform one of our songs. He never said my, one of our songs. And Dad said, that's right, sophisticated lady. He said, yes. He said, that tag at the end, did I write that? And Dad said, no, I did, Edward. Well, I would have. Which was the essence of their friendship for years. And that was 1973 when the show was taped. I too was at one of those rehearsals at A&M, which was great. Seeing it was like being in an all-star game. Everybody and their mother was there. You know, the band was amazing. That was 1972, so I was 19 years old, fresh out. I graduated high school in 1971, and Quincy's hero was Ellington as well. I went to work for Quincy in 1974, and he used to talk about Duke all the time. Duke and Basie. Ellington was composition and casting, and Basie was rhythm. I always remember a time that my father came over to my apartment one time, and I was playing the Parliament album, Mothership Connection. And Pops heard those horns, and he said, what's that, baby? I said, that's Parliament. He said, sounds like Ellington and Basie on acid. So you hear those horns, you get that. But yeah, I mean, Quincy absolutely loved Duke, and I remember hearing tales of just the frustration that he went through in the process of making this show, which was no easy task in 1972-73. CBS wasn't exactly jumping up and down because it was an all-black show, ostensibly, you know. And, you know, all black folks on network TV at that time, this was pre-Roots, it didn't really exist per se. And, you know, having Chicago on there, because Chicago was, at the time, if you recall, in context, Chicago was really sort of the so-called first of the successful horn bands in rock. Obviously, you had Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Electric Flag, but Chicago had blown up. And was, you know, and parents, or the adults dug Chicago. So that was really the context of them being on the show.
By the way, they were not actually on the telecast. And the people who put this DVD together found a recording of the Chicago performance and re-edited it into this so that you could see a full version of it. It was actually cut for the telecast.
This was actually supposed to be Chicago's first television performance.
It was
So
indeed.
I can see how someone would have maybe decided to cut it out, but it was an
Well,
important
contextually, during all those years, or 10 years, or 8 of the 10 years that I worked for Quincy, we owned a building on Beverly Boulevard, 7250 Beverly Boulevard. Our partners in the ownership of the building were guys called Larry Fitzgerald and Mark Hartley. Larry Fitzgerald had been Chicago's manager, and he and Quincy became friends as a result of the Ellington Love You Madly special. There was all kinds of like weird, crazy relationship stuff that was interwoven in there. And speaking of Quincy, there's Tina.
There's Tina.
Hey, Bina.
I was going back and doing research on this special and how it was received at the time, and I saw there was a Village Voice review by Nat Hentoff, the great critic, that was really negative. And he described this as showbiz Ellington and not real Ellington, and he felt that there was a kind of failure of jazz on TV at the time, that it wasn't capturing the totality of what was possible for jazz, and that this was just designed, to give you the flashy aspect of Ellington, but not the deep dive. And only Roberta Flack's performance actually did he kind of claim as being meaningful. I just wondered how you might think of that, and like what obviously that was written quite some time ago, because this is, to me, it's a very strange. It's almost like a time warp watching it. It's like you're like beamed into a portal into another time that just no longer exists, and so it's fabulous and fascinating to see this kind of excellence on the screen. But at the time, there were naysayers like Nat Hentoff. So I'm just wondering what you might think of that. Do you want to take that?
Well, at the time that they were looking to do the program, and Ed, you'll know a lot about this, is that they told Quincy no a bunch of times. He said, "Listen, he's not going to be around forever, and we're all understanding how wonderful and how expansive his reach has been in terms of music, and particularly in terms of jazz. there needs to be a special, and it needs to happen right away. He had already won like the Prize of Freedom or something. Nixon had given him like the
Presidential Medal of
Presidential
Freedom.
Medal of Freedom. He says, so they used that to try to sell people. Really? But that's what they needed to use to get somebody to at least pay attention. And many people said no. And then finally somebody said, well, okay. But I can imagine that there were all these constraints and conditions and things like that that were attached to being able to do it in the first place. Yeah. Having done music direction for shows that size now, later, when I watch that, what I hear and what I see are all of the hurdles, not only from the standpoint of getting good performances from people and what that means, the right key, and when we modulate, it's got to be for you, and all of that, taking a bunch of arrangers and saying, this is the size, this is the band, this is the sound, we must agree, blah, 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 all of that stuff. But the other side of that political spectrum is to get it happening at all. And at that point, Quincy did not have any television production experience at all. But I also know this about multiple intelligence, that sometimes when you know how to do something else really, really well, there's transferable knowledge that helps you understand the nuance of how to maybe do something else. And you put other qualified people around you to give you clues as to how to do it, and then you operate. And one of the things that he shared with me in one of our conversations during the years when I was trying to pay attention but maybe didn't, but get it now, is that he was one of the kinds of people where when you, to get him off the dime, for him to do something is to tell him he can't do it. Oh. Say no, you can't.
Yep.
Then watch. Yeah. And that, I think, is part of what we see, because when you have, for example, the singers that he had, to your point, there's a lot more to think about than just what note you're going to sing. There's managing a lot of talent, a lot of egos, and all of this kind of stuff, and trying to get to the music, because it was supposed to be about Duke. And to keep everybody focused on that and to do all of the kinds of things that keep it up here as opposed to down here is quite a task. So I can imagine that it was a heavy lift beyond even what we see. And all that joy and happiness that you see there is definitely something that is helped along by somebody who keeps the focus on the why.
If I can add to that, I was told a story when they first started the show. They had rehearsed the show for days, right? And it's the opening number, and everybody's on stage, and Quincy counts it off too fast. And Sarah Vaughan started singing, shall we say, an obscene lyric. That it's too effing fast, right? And put a stop to it. But I just remembered something that kind of ties us all together. And it involves USC and Quincy and a TV show and a famous singer. Were any of you around here in 2007 when we honored Ella Fitzgerald on PBS? Did you see that? Right. So that was the first television show I had produced. We did it over at the Galen Center, and we had Quincy as our host. And I brought in Phil Ramone, who you saw his name, right? Who was an incredible engineer, but he was also a great producer. And Phil Ramone, every time I get pissed off at something, he kind of grabbed me by the back of the neck and say, "No, Junior, hold on a second," right? But that was on here at USC, and it's a great show. It's a PBS special. You can see it, but that was Quincy's great time here at USC.
If I may?
Yeah, go.
As far as Nat Hentoff dissing the show, that sort of falls in line with what happened with the number of jazz critics. My dad took shit for years for quote unquote forsaking jazz. He has 7 mouths to feed, so he had wanted to have a career. So he's quote unquote forsook jazz to go to be a supper club act. Patrice, I'm sure you went through your version of it.
I'm still going through it. The idea also behind that, too, to your point, Ed, is that Quincy Jones is one of the people who gave us permission, us meaning my generation, to be great and be proud to be trying to be great. That was okay to be excellent. And it was okay to have interest in music that were beyond the thing that the box that people wanted to put you in. So his studies, as you mentioned earlier, with Nadia Boulanger, with Olivier Messiaen, and all these people, you hear that in his ability to be able to write that way and to corral others to deliver in that way. And that is beyond musical genre. But it does mean you got to know your shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's the one that's going to be called on it all the time. Why are you over here? What are you talking about? You belong over there. And if you're not on point over here, it disses even all the stuff you do well over there. So it is an interesting phenomena that sometimes you want to be in a place where excellence is celebrated, not tolerated.
That's a quote. People are going to write that down.
I hope so.
We could take a couple of questions. I think there's a couple of mics on the aisles. I can't see on this aisle, but I know that there's one over there. You could also just stand up and be really loud, too. So if there are, please come to the mic.
Tap it.
There it is. I have to say, and maybe it's just, the experience and what's going on. One of the greatest concerts that I've ever kind of seen recorded was Whitney Houston's concert in South Africa when Nelson Mandela was being released. And she opened up with Love's in Need of Love. Today with the Take 6 excerpt, kind of shout out to Mervyn Warren. From my alma mater as well, Oakwood College, University. But I say that to say, and I know Quincy, had ties with Take 6 and Stevie Wonder and Whitney Houston. This recording, and maybe I'm young, but it's also one of the greatest productions, performances. I was really trying to stay dignified in my seat, especially during the Aretha Franklin moment. I was about to shout myself. So my question is, right, watching, Peggy Lee in the midst of the trombones and when they opened up, then you had the singers, on the steps, and even the way, I believe it was Roberta Flack, how she kind of grabbed her microphone from the piano. Quincy is one of the greatest creatives around. And I aspire, I tell people, I say I am not saying I'm Quincy Jones, but I aspire to create like he did, to sing, to conduct, to produce. He did TV shows, he did orchestrations, he was in a jazz band, he conducted a jazz band. When you're trying to learn and move in an industry that likes to say, you're a singer, you're a pianist, you're a conductor. I'm curious if any of you all would know how he navigated that, being able to be everything that he was, and was there any intentionality where he maybe had to fight to be all that he was, to create on the level that he was able to create?
Great question. Ed, do you want to take that?
Sure.
Use your mic.
Yes, of course. Duh. Did he have to fight? You bet he did, constantly. Quincy, for the years that I was with him, rejected all notions of the thought, you're a this, you're a that. I'm a this, I'm a that. I'm not a you're a. You can't make a movie with Steven Spielberg directing it. I can't? Watch me do it, You can't produce Michael Jackson. Watch me do it, Off to the races he went. You can't do this, you can't do that. So he fought constantly, be it with record companies, network executives, just fill in the blank. It was always a battle for him, But more often than not, he won. So if you believe, his mantra constantly was, if you believe you can do it, go about the business of doing it. Don't wait for somebody to validate it. So.
Are there additional questions here in the aisle, or you're just standing in the aisle? Okay, all right. I have a question sort of related to that, which is that we're still in this moment, cultural moment, musical moment, where there are these debates around issues of genre, especially for black artists. So thinking of Beyonce this year and Cowboy Carter, which was released, and the debates around whether a black artist, black woman artist, who is, by the way, one of the top-selling and most successful artists of her time, can even just release a country album. Just. But this idea that still in this day and age, where we're, the way that we listen to music is so impacted by streaming services, where we have access to so much, that people are still limited in terms of what they're able to do and the kind of reach that they're able to have. It's striking to me that these are some of the same kinds of debates that animated the era that we were just looking at. Patrice, you will be celebrated at Walt Disney Concert Hall in a couple of weeks with On Dissonance, the Solange Knowles curated event that is looking at specific black female classical composers who did not get as much due. I believe that's the kind of nature of the event. This is something that you, I think, in so many ways have demonstrated, like, that these genres and these styles and so on, you can have access to all of it, and you can do all of it, and you have those multiple competencies. Can you just speak to that and why we're still in this moment in 2024 of genre, like challenging genre, feeling that so many artists feel that genre is a kind of prison? Why are we in that mode still?
I don't know. Yeah. But I will say that one of the things that I have noticed is that people don't see the people you saw on the video, that's who we saw doing it all the time. Don't you get up on the stage and do something or get a record deal and not be at a level where you have something to say. You couldn't get very far unless there was the obvious potential that there was going to be more. So I think that part of it has something to do with it, that, we have lots of people out playing music, and because it's very accessible, because everybody likes music, everybody thinks they can do it. I like to eat, but I ain't a chef. So, there are some other nuanced things involved if you're going to do it at a certain level. And I think that sometimes we've lost that almost law of what art requires of people who want to be involved in it, and it's the mentor-disciple relationship. We had them to ask. And if they got that we were serious, they would answer, and they would put you to work to make sure that it wasn't like, I'm just giving you this information for you to just sit around. And the idea was to be able to use it to perpetuate the art, not to perpetuate the individual's fame. So I think there's a different set of reasoning and standards that gets mixed in this gumbo of why people are doing what they're doing and why we're still trying to tell people what they're supposed to be doing, instead of encouraging them and building the bridges for them to have access to be able to do it well, and that be the requirement. I'm not putting anybody down or dissing anybody who wants to be famous. There's lots of perks to being famous. But fame is typically the result of being able to do something. And my worst fear would be to have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of eyes on me and can't do the thing. Or can do the thing for 30 seconds versus somebody who has been trying to do the thing for 30 years. There's something weird about a platform that allows the same access, and we didn't have that. We didn't have the same access. We had to actually talk to those people, And when I saw that, I kind of teared up, because I know that many of them I worked with later in shows. So Sammy Davis Jr., Joe Williams, Aretha Franklin, Roberta Flack, all of these people I did have a chance to finally work with. And some of them have gotten out of here now. And that's to your point about why it's so important to now document it and celebrate those who we know have this extra whatever it is that allows for them to be able to touch people at a certain level and have done the work and maybe got some of that extra from the Quincy Joneses and people like that. Because the young people, they're not asking me. They don't really, I'm not sure they want to know. There's not the same kind of connection because we're chasing instead the followers and the numbers. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm saying there's a price to pay for that, and I think that part of that price is why we don't see en masse that, what we saw tonight. That was the standard. We saw that all the time. It was about being that or not. And I don't know that it's quite the same measuring tools.
Very well put.
Jason. I want to add to what Patrice said, because Cowboy Carter caused a big dust-up in the music community and the ethnic community. And the obvious thing is to say, she's an African-American artist, therefore why is she making a country record? I don't think that's it. It could be with some, but I think with most people, when you become an artist at the stature of Beyonce, you're suddenly asking an audience to ignore that artist that we've grown and loved suddenly to become someone else. Garth Brooks tried the same thing many years ago, but he actually started using a different name, and he wanted to be a rock and roll artist. It didn't work. Right? So let's take a wider look at this and say, what's really going on here? Is it really, no, you're black, you shouldn't make a country record? Again, it could be for some folks. I don't think that's it. I think what we're doing here is we're taking an artist that is so iconic and so beloved, and she's asking us to say, we want to now see you and hear you and love you in this new genre. And frankly, if you were to take the racial aspect out, if it were, Stevie Nicks suddenly trying to do a country record, it might be a similar reaction, right? It's more.
I think it would be beloved. I think it might go to the top of the chart. I don't know. I think she's seeing it. I don't want to get into a debate about Beyonce here because we don't have any time left. But she's seeing it as it's not like music outside of her, but the music that she grew up with, and it's
absolutely.
And all of these, and I think what we see on stage, on that stage, is people who have had access to so much music, and it just moves through them. And so why shouldn't you be able to express yourself in any way that you choose to?
100%.
But I've got to say, unfortunately, we're out of time. No. I know we could go on for another hour probably, and. Okay, one more question. It's gonna have to be real quick, and then.
It will be quick. It will
Okay,
be
go
quick,
ahead.
I promise. I have a question referring to the caliber that you're speaking of. How do we bridge that gap between the youth who do not have that exposure or caliber? So it's not even that we're not asking, right? Because I suppose I represent Gen Z as I stand here, right? It's not that we're not asking, we don't know to ask. And a lot of the times when people like us are prohibited and hindered from that exposure to that caliber, right? We take what we have and we run with it. And that is social media these days. So is there a reality where, someone like you who has the luxury that you fought hard to be in that position and worked very hard to be where you are, somebody like you can have someone that represents me in the social media and have a conversation about the education, about what it takes, and can you and them learn from one another?
Wow.
Because the time is running out, do you have a short soundbite answer?
Short soundbite. You came here, and you know who's here. So tell other people to come here. You got X number of free concerts and free ways for them to be exposed to the degree that you can. I'm not saying it's perfect, but to the degree that you can be exposed to that kind of excellence, take it. It won't go to you all the time. That's the other issue. And since it's around you in sporadic ways, when you have the advantage of being able to go, you should go. And you should demand in situations where you come together as a collective, whether it's Gen Z or whomever, and there's information that you want, be specific about what you want so that there's not a lot of time, so the questions that you need to have asked, you want them asked and addressed and possibly answered by people who you respect and by people who you know. But you have to do some of the work before you get here.
Absolutely. And I do
And
think,
if you do some of that and spread that message to
Yes.
others, maybe there will be more of you that will get that information. I'm dying to give a lot of information to a lot of people, and I know I'm in an environment where a lot of my people can't get here. I know that, and it bugs me. But the idea is you see me, so ask me.
I mean, your song right now is viral on TikTok.
I know.
I see a great relationship forming there. Okay, we are literally out of time. I want to be respectful to the staff here. So I will have to ask that we don't congregate here, but we go outside. This is Los Angeles, weather's nice. We can talk all night outside. So please do that. Thank the panel, Ed Eckstine, Gregg Field, Patrice Rushen, Quincy Jones, Duke Ellington. We'll see you October 23rd. October 23rd, USC. Thank you.